I paid off $30,000 in student loan debt while I was bringing home less than $26K a year. So I'd say I paid off all my debt while I was broke. Is it possible for you to pay off your debt when you're broke? Well, I'd say that depends on how much debt you have and the type of debt you have. Because paying off debt when you're broke is very, very different than paying off debt when you have support from a family member or a partner. It's very, very different from when you're living at home for free or when you're a high income person. Paying off debt when you're broke requires different tools and it requires a very different mindset, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Hey y'all, I'm Kara Perez, founder of Bravely Go, and today I'm going to let you in on all the details of how I paid off $30,000 in student loan debt and interest in 3.5 years while I was only working part-time and making anywhere between $16,000 a year and $26,000 a year. And yes, I have the tax returns to prove it. Always cite your sources. Hit the subscribe button if you're ready to pay off your debt too. So I know my debt payoff story of $30,000 paid off total in just 3.5 years while making only $16K a year. I know it sounds like wild clickbait, but I promise it's true. The thing is, it just wasn't very glamorous. Okay, let's start by citing those sources. Here are my tax returns. So as you can see, I made $16,360 in 2014 after taxes. And here's my 2015 tax return, where you can see that I made $22,916 after taxes. 2015 is the year that I became debt-free. I no longer have any type of debt, but that makes me a real weirdo in America today. In 2021, American student loan debt hit a total of $1.6 trillion, carried by over 45 million Americans. And it's not just a young person's problem, even though we like to think of student loan debt as only being an issue for 18 to 25-year-olds. Everyone from Gen Z to boomers carries student loan debt here in the United States. And unfortunately, due to capitalism being broken, many of those 45 million Americans are broke or very close to it. So paying off debt while broke is a very pertinent question in our society today. Before I get into the details, I just want to say at the top that personal finance is personal. What I'm about to tell you, the numbers I'm about to share, the tactics I used, maybe some of them apply to your life and maybe some of them don't, and that's totally fine. I'm not sharing this story as I did it and that's proof that anyone can do it too. I'm sharing this story because it is my truth, and I hope that there's a part of it that you can either relate to or that makes you feel seen, or best of all, that is helpful to you in your debt payoff journey. So longtime Bravely followers and viewers of this channel will know that I've never had a full-time salaried job. No one has ever looked at me and been like, hey girl, let's get you a salary. You want a bi-weekly paycheck? You deserve that. Never. I graduated college in 2011, and the first job I got was waiting tables, which anyone who has ever worked as a waitress knows is a cash business, largely a cash business. And how much you make depends on how busy the restaurant is that day. So from June 2011 until September 2013, I worked exclusively as a waitress, and I had to pay for my own rent, my car insurance, my groceries, everything off of my waitress income. My adjusted gross income was $15,257 that year. That is working full-time as a waitress. Wah, wah, wah. So, as should be abundantly clear by now, I was very low income for the first half of my 20s. But I had this student loan debt and I had to make payments. My payments started off being about $400 a month. I had 5 different student loans across 2 different lenders. For the first couple of years out of college, I have to admit that my student loan debt definitely stressed me out, but it wasn't a financial priority in my life because I just didn't have that much money to work with. And also, I was 23, I had just moved to Austin, I was doing a lot of drinking and going out and just having a good time. And I regret none of that, honestly. It was really fun, and now I'm 34 and I'm less fun. I mean, I'm still very fun, but just fun in a very different way. I'm fun in the like, why don't you come over and we'll play Settlers of Catan way, not in the like, we're gonna shut down this bar way. Both are equal, both are cool, both are appropriate for different times of my life. So it wasn't until 2014 that I got serious about paying off my student loans. And as I previously shared, I was still low income at the time. I wasn't waiting tables anymore. I was working part-time as a caterer and part-time as a lacrosse coach. When I say part-time as a lacrosse coach, I mean seasonally. So I did that job from February to May of 2014. And then after that, it was just catering all summer long. Now, this kind of lifestyle of working part-time and working in food service is actually really important to how I paid off my debt. The first thing I did when I was paying off my debt was sit down and get organized. Like I said, early on in 2012, 2013, paying off my student loans wasn't really a priority. So I knew I had a bunch of different loans, but I didn't really know where they belonged. I didn't know what the interest rate was. I wasn't organized about it at all. So in 2014, after having my quarter life crisis and literally having a breakdown in my 2009 Kia Rio on I-35, which is the highway we have right here in Austin, goes right through the center of the city, where I was like, money is ruining my life. I wiped the tears away from my eyes, pulled up my logins for my lenders, and looked at what I was really working with. My student loan debt was such an emotional burden. It really stressed me out all the time, starting in early 2014, because I was seeing my friends do things like travel and get engaged and get promotions. And here I was working this like shitty catering job, still having the student loan debt and not really making any progression as an adult in my life. I really felt stuck. I felt stagnated, and I did not like who I was or where I was. So sitting down, looking at my numbers, it was hard. It was very stressful, and it definitely aggravated these feelings of unworthiness that I already had. But it also made me feel a little bit more in control, because the great thing, as Jay-Z once said, is men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Looking at the numbers, they were immutable facts. They didn't have any type of feelings about me. They were just like, here's how much you owe, here's when the payment is due, here's what the interest rate is. And just kind of that pure simplicity allowed me to say, okay, I can do this. Debt can be eliminated so much more easily once you have a plan. So if you have any kind of debt, sit down, make a list, open a spreadsheet, get a notebook, write them all down, organize it out by the lender. So if you have a credit card with Discover and then you have a student loan with Great Lakes, those are two different lenders. Then write out the current amount you owe, the current balance due. Then write out the payment due date and what the minimum payment is. And then finally, I want you to write out the interest rate. Now you have the truth of your debt. And yes, it might bring up negative feelings. I really want to honor and acknowledge that because it did for me. But I want you to remember that this is just your starting point. This is not the finish line for you. Everything in front of you, that's what we're working on changing. Step 2, after I got organized, was to earn more money. Look, y'all, the truth is when you're as low income as I was, you can't really pay off debt. When you're only making $15,000 a year, which is what I made in 2012, it's impossible to do anything besides pay for your bare necessities. I mean, between 2012 and 2015, I made between $15,257 and $18,423. And like I mentioned before, from 2012 on, I was responsible for all my own expenses. So any groceries, any doctor's visits, rent, utilities, all the things were on me and that 16 grand a year. And I was already doing all of the things that I possibly could to lower my expenses. I lived with 3 roommates. My rent was $500 the entire time I was paying off my debt. I didn't have a car payment because I owned my car outright. For a period of time, I didn't even have health insurance because I couldn't afford it. I did a lot of walking to places instead of driving, so I didn't have to spend as much on gas. Really, there was very little fat still to trim in my budget. I needed to bring in more money if I was going to make any kind of serious headway on my debt. Now, more money ended up being about $6,000 more a year, but hey, $6,000 more a year was $6,000 more a year to me at the time, and it was amazing. I ended up working 5 different part-time jobs. I just accumulated a bunch of part-time gigs. Yes, for people who are wondering, I did apply to a lot of full-time salaried positions, but nobody hired me, and I wasn't going to just wait around for a job to kind of land into my lap. My debt was stressing me out, it was making me depressed, and the bills had to get paid, so I just pieced together a bunch of part-time jobs. So at this point, just to kind of recap where we are on my timeline here, it's 2014, it's June 2014, when I have my crying in car, oh my gosh, money is ruining my life moment. At that point, I decide, hey, I have to do something about this. In July 2014, I sit down and look at all of my numbers and come up with the rough draft of a plan. Then by September, I was applying for all sorts of different part-time jobs. I was on Craigslist. I was on Facebook. I was talking to people in my life saying, do you know anyone who needs help? Do you know anyone who needs help? And I was just beginning to piece together what would eventually become my 5 different part-time job hustle. And by the end of the year, I was working as a van driver for a high school golf team, a caterer. I was still doing my catering, a nonprofit part-time fundraiser, a freelance writer, and a social media content creator for other people's businesses. I hadn't started Bravely yet. Now remember, all of these were part-time jobs, so I would layer them on each other. And lots of my work was seasonal. Driving the van, for example, ran from September to early December. Coaching lacrosse, which I did in spring 2015, was only during the spring, from February to May. Freelance writing was consistent, but it was only a few hours a week, and it could be done whenever I wanted. Same with the social media content creation. It was about 7 hours a week, and it could be done at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. The nonprofit fundraising was really the one where I had kind of more set hours, but because I was a contract worker, they couldn't tell me, hey, you have to do this at exactly this time. They would just give me deadlines that the work had to be done by. So all of this was a lot to keep track of, yes, but it also lent itself to schedule flexibility, meaning I could wake up in the morning first thing and knock out some freelance writing and some social media content creation. Then in the afternoon, I could go drive the van, come back and pick up a catering shift that started at 5 p.m. and work through the evening. And having all of these different jobs meant my income went up. Not by a lot, but it did go up. The other thing I did to increase my income was get paid more for the work I was already doing. I began catering in September 2013, and I was hired at $12 an hour. And for the first year of working as a caterer, I didn't ask for a raise, so no one ever gave me one. So in September 2014, I asked for a raise, and I got bumped to $13 an hour. Not that big of a difference, but hey, it mattered. Then in February, end of January, early February, I can't quite remember, 2014, I got another raise to $16.50 an hour. And let me tell you, as someone who was still working 5 different part-time jobs, still paying off her debt at the time, that $3.50 an hour made such a big difference. It was a discernible change in my paychecks. And I was like, I am God. $16.50 an hour felt like so much money. It was wild. So those are the ways that I increased my income. The often unspoken truth in personal finance is that you need to have money in order to make changes to your money. By getting my side hustle on, I was able to increase my income, and that meant making more debt payments. Finally, step 3 in paying off my debt while I was broke was to implement a debt payoff strategy. So I had gotten organized, I had increased my income a little bit, but I was really strategic in my payoff strategy. In the personal finance world, there are 2 major debt payoff strategies. There's the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. And let me break them down for you. The debt snowball says to list out all of your debts from highest debt to lowest debt. So if you have a $10,000 credit card and a $5,000 student loan, your credit card debt has the higher balance, right? With the snowball, it says make the minimum payment on the credit card and put any extra payments you have towards the student loan until it is totally paid off. Then, once it's paid off, roll those extra payments plus the student loan minimum into the credit card, and then you will snowball your way to debt freedom. because small things add up to big things. The debt avalanche is basically the same strategy, but instead of focusing on paying off the debt with the smallest balance first, you focus on paying off the debt with the highest interest rate first. So if your $10,000 credit card debt has a 25% interest rate and your $5,000 student loan has a 3% interest rate, with the debt avalanche, you would actually focus on paying off the credit card first. Which one is better is a question I get a lot, and honestly, I think whichever one works for you is going to be best. Technically speaking, mathematically speaking, the debt avalanche will save you the most money because you end up paying the least amount in interest. And if that is something that motivates you and gets you going, great, use the debt avalanche. If you want to use the debt snowball, also great, use the debt snowball. In a very fortunate twist of fate, for me, I actually ended up using both because my smallest debts had the highest interest rate. And so just by following that, I was able to utilize both strategies. And that is pretty much all of my debt payoff secrets, y'all. That's how I was able to pay off $30,000 in student loan debt while I was broke as hell. So I hope you enjoyed getting a peek into my tax returns and a peek into my debt payoff strategy. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments. I'm happy to talk debt payoff with you. Please give this video a little like to boost us in the algorithm. We are a new channel. Any kind of like or comment really goes a long way to helping us, and make sure to hit subscribe.